Welcome to week 17 of the summer of 2020. I would imagine that you might have a few things accumulating in your refrigerator if you had a busy school week last week. So let's talk a little bit about how to triage a box, because we have one of the more fragile treasures coming out this week out of one of our greenhouses. Look how gorgeous that arugula is. You never want to pre-wash this, unless it's the day you're going to use it. Oh, I can smell it from here. It's heavenly. It's very fragile, and once you get it wet, it can go limp very fast. So my approach is to use it the day I get it or the next day, and then wash it in the morning, spin it dry, wrap it in a towel gently, and then serve it later on. We're going to eat it tomorrow morning for breakfast with a light vinaigrette on it, really simple, and poached eggs on top, because this is just too much of a special. I was going to put it on a mezze platter, and I said, nah, this is going to be breakfast. We have lots of interesting stuff happening here. First of all, guess what's coming out of the field? This is not a jack-o'-lantern pumpkin. Those are for grand largeness, and they're just fiber and water. This is a sugar, like a type of a sugar pie pumpkin. It's called a New England pie pumpkin. They've just been harvested recently, and they've got a good start on curing. So yes, it's ripe, but I like my winter squash, whatever it is, unless it's delicata, to have a few weeks, if not more, to transpire some of the moisture that's stored inside out. And what that does is it intensifies the flavors of the flesh, and you get a much richer pumpkin pie. If you're roasting it, it doesn't turn to mush. So you'll find that these will store. This is Mother Nature's keeper food. So if you really have a lot of winter squash, say you planted some in your garden this year, Ken will post our instructions on how to cure winter squash over the winter season. But this will probably end up in either enchiladas or maybe something sweet like a pumpkin pie, but not for a month or so. Keep an eye. You always want to make sure it's got a good healthy stem on it. There are no spots that are mushy. If there's a mushy spot, then you can use it right away. But this is a good one that would be easily stored. So that's enough on winter squash for right now. Here's something you might not recognize. That's the top of a Brussel Sprouts plant, and they get really tall. And we've learned to harvest this because that's a green unto itself. I thought those are perfect for wraps. If you steam them, look how tender they are. So, but I'm not in the mood for an Asian flavored meal this week. And I tend to pick a palette of spices that all kind of generally agree with each other, so that if I have leftovers, they can go into the next item. That's how I get away with one meal tumbling into another. And so this is sort of summer's last hurrah, at least it feels like it to me this week. So I want to have one of those big vegetable platters that you can sit at a picnic table and enjoy in the last of the sunshine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to steam these and serve them with some of my leftover rice that I'm going to cook up with some turmeric and onions and garlic, just so it has that nice golden flavor and a little more heat with the turmeric. And that'll be one of the stuffings that can go in here. We're going to roast beets and carrots and cauliflower in chunks, so that they'll be on a platter, and they'll be drizzled with the tahini dressing, and those could go in these wraps. I'm going to make baba ganoush, and I realized today I've never made that for you down at the farm, so I'll give you my recipe for eggplant baba ganoush. And I tried something last year with some of our less than prime eggplants we would never pass out to members before they went to waste. I took about 5 of them home and roasted them and made a baba ganoush and froze them in 1-cup increments. And Ken and I used those for picnic road trips. As it defrosted, it was just great for dipping veggies in. So it's not quite as creamy, but it's good enough in January. So if you're feeling a little overwhelmed and you want something stashed for snacks later on for work or school, there's an option for you. And I'll make a note of that on the recipe for you. Don't forget to take the tops off of the beets. I think this week I'm going to do a stir fry. So I'll make sure I dice the stems and stash those, and then I'll chiffonade the greens on the beets and the kales, and I'll just throw all that in a bag together. I'll keep this chopped up stem separately because I want to saute those or quick flash cook those with a flash cook them with a little bit of onion. So I'll keep them separate from the chiffonade leaves, but that way I can just quickly throw together lunch or something. We've got potatoes coming out of the fields and more peppers. Yay for our, I'm assuming, greenhouses. A few onions, and we're going to be using that in some of our, well, I know it'll go in my baba ganoush. Let's see, there's the cauliflower and corn. I keep thinking we've seen the last of the corn, and David keeps surprising me. I think we'll grill it this weekend. What do you think? And a few tomatoes. And then I set out an apple dip. And I usually make this once a year down at the farm, right about the time school starts. We still have apples coming out of the orchards, and it's honey and curry and pureed apples with a little salt and vinegar. It's one of those homemade condiments that has nutrition in it and a ton of flavor. It's great for dipping, so that's why I have the platter out here with the apple sliced. It's nummy that way, or if you want something a little more sophisticated, you could just very gingerly finger toss some of that apple curry dressing into the arugula with some really creamy goat cheese, and you'd have a grown-up salad. But most often it gets served like that. So give that a try. I make it with a more robust curry. I think it's a Kashmiri curry. But if you're making it for kids, just use the good old grocery store curry. It'll expand their palate without overwhelming them. Did I miss anything, Ken? I think I got everything. It's time to meet me in the kitchen. Bye. So we're in the kitchen, and it took me about, less than 20 minutes to do this. I have 3 of the larger carrots that I scrubbed and then sliced on a diagonal. I want as much surface area for roasting as possible. Tossed it in a little olive oil. Same thing with the cauliflower. I saved my cauliflower from last week, hoping that we might get another one. So this is 2 small heads of cauliflower and that bunch of beets that might arrive in your box that I peeled raw, tossed in a little olive oil, and then you always just want to flatten it out so you have as much surface area on the baking sheet as possible. I want to use the same heat to roast my eggplant to make baba ganoush. So I took a knife and I stabbed some holes in it so that it can let the steam escape, otherwise it might blow up in the oven like a potato. You know how that can happen. And I want to get it charred just a little bit. So the oven is set at 450, and I'm going to put it in for about 10 minutes. See how my other vegetables are doing. Mine runs pretty hot with the convection fan. I might turn it down, but it'll be up to you to use your discernment. You want it hot because you don't want to steam the vegetables. And you want to get as much caramelization on at least one side as possible because that's where the sugars develop. The reason you see me separating the vegetables is because some are going to come out quicker than others. I have a hunch the beets will be in there the longest. I'm not sure about the eggplant. You just cook them till they're mushy and they get some char points on them. So if you can poke them and it collapses, then you know the eggplant is done, because in baba ganoush, you use the whole thing. You just take the stem off the top, skin and all, it just goes in the food processor. It's really easy. So let's get this in the oven, get it cooking. We'll keep an eye on it. I'm going to set it for 10 minutes with the fan on, and then may turn it down to 425 with the fan on to extend the cooking. So we'll see. So what we're building is a Northwest Mezze Platter. The vegetables you'll see won't be necessarily traditional Middle Eastern or Mediterranean. That's okay. We're just adapting it to the food that we grow here in the Northwest. These are the Brussel Sprouts leaves that were so gorgeous. I even saved the little guys as little scoops, so we can stuff these like a wrap if we want to. I wash them in a little salt water. Like I've explained, it's a good thing to do. I had about 3 or 4 cups of leftover brown basmati rice. I hadn't cooked it in chicken stock or anything fancy. It was really neutral. So what I did was I took about 3 tablespoons of olive oil, chunked up an onion into a fairly large dice, cooked that until the onion looked pretty sweet, added about 2 teaspoons of turmeric and some salt. I could have added garlic. I had some chili peppers that I had already soaked a little bit, so I wanted to infuse a little of that flavor. And then don't be shy on the olive oil once you get this thing toasting. After the onion is cooked and the flavor has begun to bloom from the turmeric, then you want to add the rice. And what I do is add probably another 3 tablespoons of oil to that onion turmeric mixture. Take the cold rice that's fairly dry, you know, it's been in the refrigerator for a day, break it up, mush it into the pan, and then just leave it alone and let it toast on a medium low. Keep an eye on it. You don't want to burn it, but you kind of want to get a little crunch on there. And then you can stir it and move the flavor and the color through. So it's the turmeric that gives it that lovely golden color. And so this can just augment the platter that we're creating. And I know this is a huge amount of food. There's only 2 of us. Ken and I can nosh on this for several days and be quite content. In the end, what will be available to us will be some pita bread that we cooked about a month ago. I'm going to toast up this evening. We'll have this rice and Brussel sprout greens to create a wrap. And other things that can go in the wrap to make it more interesting will be Greek olives, some feta, roasted beets, roasted cauliflower, roasted carrots. The roasted vegetables are all going to have a tahini dressing on them, and we're going to use Mimi's tahini dressing. There are 2 on the website, and I'll have Ken pull forward the one we're using this week. It's really rich with, or bright with lemon, fresh lemon juice. So I've got 2 whole lemons. I'll have probably 3 cloves of garlic. It's got sesame seed, tahini in it, olive oil, and then the lemon juice. Anyway, we'll pull the recipe up for you. I'm going to spin that up in the food processor quickly, and then that'll be the drizzle that we use so that this will have a bright background flavor in it. It'll be good nummy eating. And then if you're lucky enough to have lamb, I know the farm had lamb available last week. Don't miss out on it. This is the perfect night to grill some of those lamb chops. So we'll be back. So you can see here where I took the carrots off. They came off first. They've got some nice brown on them. I like to see that. I turned the eggplant over. You can see this one starting to collapse. He's in the back of the oven. I think I'm going to pull him over here and forward and get a little more caramelization. I want a little more brown on my cauliflower. I'm kind of picky. So I'm going to flip it over, but you can see what it's starting to look like. If it doesn't touch the pan, it doesn't get that pretty brown. The beets are going to be the last thing to come out. Oops, I try not to get them too commingled. It's not the end of the world, but I want them to shine on their own. So I'm going to put this in for a few more minutes, like maybe 3 or 4, and I'll probably pull the cauliflower out at that point. The beets, I'm going to stir them a little bit, but they have a long way to go, which is fine. That's why we do them in segregated vegetable sections. And when the eggplant is ready to go into the baba ganoush, then I'll put it in the food processor and show you what we have. So back in the oven this goes. So I removed one of the eggplants. It was probably in a little bit hotter spot in the oven. See how it's gushy and that skin is not black but nicely toasted? Hands out of the picture. There you go. I left the other one in because it was still a little bit firm. So it's still in with the beets. You can take a peek at them right now. They're not quite done. See this one? See, it's just not quite soft enough. So it's getting a little more time in the oven. And now we just go at it at 5-minute increments. I pulled the cauliflower out, and this is how I like mine toasted. Lots of wonderful flavors coming forward in the vegetable, and I have convinced non-vegetable eaters to eat this, even just plain. This is our tahini lemon sauce. This is Mimi's version of a tahini one, and I really like it. It's bright, and the recipe will be up, and I would just put it out on the table like that, and then Ken and I could drizzle as we plate for ourselves. That way any leftovers are still neutral and they can turn into something else, a lunch later on, a dinner. Fill it out with some grilled, I don't know, a piece of meat, some good sausages you've got hiding in the freezer, whatever you've got, something along that. A little fat with it really helps it, helps the flavors to bloom. So we'll be back. So I cut the stem off, got the little leaves, you don't want those in there, and then I'm going to let it cool. Now another way to do this that really adds a smoky flavor to it that's great is to put it on your grill. We have too many things going on this afternoon, so we're going to keep it simple this way. I've already got all the ingredients in here except the lemon juice, and I just discovered I had used up all my lemons in the tahini dressing, so we will be really bold, and we're going to go with lime in our baba ganoush. I don't think it'll be the end of the world. So I'm only making a half of a batch of the recipe because I had just barely a pound of eggplant, but that's fine. And so we're going to go ahead and everything's in here. We're just going to pulse it. I did cut it open and let it cool because I didn't want that hot eggplant going into my olive oil and damaging it over the long haul. So you can see the skin in there. I guess if you have really picky eaters in your family, you could scrape the meat out, but that's where a lot of the flavor is from the roasting. Smells good. So that'll go in a bowl. And then any leftovers after our dinner tonight, I think I'm going to put in the freezer for picnics later on this winter. So here we are, back in the kitchen, and the platter's all ready to go. This is what the baba ganoush looks like. It's nice and creamy. It does have flecks from the skin. And these are the roasted beets. And they took about 35-40 minutes to get them fully caramelized. And what it does is it reduces the moisture level in them, so the flavors are going to come forward and the toasting will come forward. So if I was going to plate this for myself, I'd get all the vegetables organized on my plate. I'd probably put some feta over it, some black olives, and then I would drizzle the tahini dressing over it. And then I could start assembling some of the wraps and then put some of those little goodies in it and maybe put a little smear of baba ganoush in there. And we've got dinner. Have a great week, folks, and be very kind to your neighbors. I wanted to take a minute and just review some of our goals for the summer that Mimi and I set out for you. Really, we wanted to make sure that you knew how to triage your box of vegetables so that you knew what to use first and what was most fragile and how to extend their storability, if you will. And there are plenty of resources. Please poke around and review those if you've forgotten some of them. And then another one is to see recipes more as a template, and we've given you quite a few of those. So you might want to go back and revisit farm fried rice, Jubilee style, and see what vegetables you've got in your box or lurking in your refrigerator that could disappear quite easily into a dish like that. And the honey ginger dressing is a kid favorite, and that'll make all kinds of things go down easily. Learning to use vegetables that you might not find in the grocery store that are loaded with flavor and they're delicate and they're perfect for a wrap this week. Learning to use bits and pieces in your refrigerator and even just to cook in a pattern that leaves you some of those options. I've mentioned earlier that I try to cook a grain. This is brown basmati. I consider that kind of on the light side, but I try to have a legume or a bean, something cooked like that is easily grabbed and can build out a dish. Even having garbanzo beans cooked ahead of time gives you tons of options. I try to have a protein cooked ahead of time or plan it into the week when that's going to build out, like a chicken or a piece of pork or a piece of beef or even just stock from those. This might show up on your table with an Asian flair, but this week we're doing something a little more Mediterranean. So we have baba ganoush because we had eggplant. And then, you know, we've got traditional vegetables that are gorgeous, carrots and cauliflower and beets, and feta and black olive. So you can change the flavor profile and use very similar vegetables. So go back and revisit some of those, and we will try to build some more skills in next week.